Good evening, blessings to you all. This is Tuesday night, so that means question time. So there's a few questions today. First one is, how do we practice in order to benefit parents who have passed away? I guess the very beginning of that might be what your attitude towards karma and rebirth is. Some people just quite automatically believe in rebirth, that when a human being dies, that's not the end of the story, and according to karma they will be reborn in a new realm of existence. The body is left behind, consciousness arises in a wholesome destination or an unwholesome destination, depending on the kind of karma that being has developed. So some people are brought up with that belief and accept it quite naturally and easily. Other people come to hold that view, that belief over time, maybe practicing and contemplating it, thinking about it more, maybe even having their own experience in their meditation, and then they accept that teaching. Of course, many people are very skeptical or flatly deny it, don't believe in it. But if you have that belief, and that faith, confidence, a confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, teaching of the enlightened monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen since the time of the Buddha, who all seem to confirm the teaching on karma and rebirth, then you can take that on as a framework for how you view the world, view your life, and you realize karma matters. The kind of karma you make every day through body, speech and mind matters. And one form of karma, good karma, is dedication of merit to the dead. Of course, you could also say, as Luang Por Chah and many other teachers used to joke, don't just think when I die I'll be fine because my kids are going to make merit on my behalf, and they'll perform funeral ceremonies and make offerings and share the merit and everything will be good. You don't wait for that, because it might never happen. Who can tell what will happen after we die? Maybe everyone will forget us, or maybe our kids won't believe in karma and rebirth and sharing merit, and they'll just ignore the whole thing. Who knows? So make your own good karma, your own merit while you're alive. Make that your refuge, so that when you die, your mind is in a good space. You have self-confidence, you recollect good things, you've practiced meditation. Ideally, you can let go of all the negative states of mind, and then you have a good rebirth. And if you're really dedicated, you may not even be reborn at all. Maybe reach the level of an Aryapugala with a limitation. So Sotapanna, 7 rebirths, Sakadagami, 1 rebirth, Anagami, no more rebirths in the world, just in the Brahma realm, and then Arahant, no more rebirth at all. That would be best, wouldn't it? But our parents die, we can dedicate all the good actions and good things we do in our life to them, to their memory. And we can have specific merit-making ceremonies dedicate to them. We do our own practice of chanting, meditation, dedicate to them. Even just quietly, humbly reflecting on the goodness of your parents from time to time, and just sharing those thoughts and the gratitude and appreciation with them, sending it in their direction, is also merit. So best of all, make your own merit, so you don't need anyone to do it for you. But for the living, we can dedicate our good actions to the memory of our parents every day. And it's one source of inspiration and energy in life, isn't it? You're doing something for somebody else. We often find that motivates us. So you can say on your parents' death anniversary day, you could do an hour's meditation. If you're somebody who finds it difficult to meditate or to commit to it, and you want to remember that day and remember your parent, then that's a good day to meditate for an hour, or do some chanting, or listen to a Dhamma talk, or go to the monastery and make some offerings. But use these occasions wisely, skillfully, to bring up your effort in the practice, to honour the memory of your parent. And you can imagine if they can know, like we just chanted, if the devas help pass on the message, or if the karmic connection is strong and your parents know what you're doing, you're making merit for them, they're going to feel happy. Even if they die with a state of mind that is not happy, which is quite possible, isn't it? People die often with sadness, unresolved business, attachments, which cloud their mind as they die. But if we are making merit on their behalf and they to know about that, it would make them rejoice, wouldn't it? They feel happy. Or perhaps your parents don't need merit, they're already in a realm of happiness, a happy destination. Maybe they're devas, maybe they're just knowing what we're doing and they're rejoicing in what we're doing, and they want us to benefit from the practice of Dhamma. So it's not that they need merit, but they just want us to make more merit out of their love and concern for us. Just as the living do. Our living who are established in faith, in Buddhism and Buddhist teachings, their expression of love is often to try and get us to practice. True love is getting someone to practice for Nibbana, and then you never meet again. So like when we had the ordination here the other day, lots of people come to, we say, anumodana, share their appreciation of the good event. And that's how we show our love, isn't it? We encourage others to do good, or we dedicate the good actions to the dead. There's another question. How to contemplate the four elements in the body in order to realize anatta, not self? Well, the four elements, earth, air, fire and water, are both meditation objects for developing states of calm, samadhi. So focusing on one of those four, you can only do one thing at a time, one object at a time. So, say focusing on the air, the air element, we're already doing that in anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. But say the earth element, how do you focus on the earth element as a meditation? Well, you need maybe to develop a sign. So it could be, we say the hardness of parts of the body reflect the earth element. So there's, on one hand, there's the visualization of the earth element in the body. So say, imagine bones, for example, or a bone. Why do bones last longer than other bits of the body? Because they're harder. They have more earth element than water or air elements, say. So you can focus on the bones, first of all, whatever image you have in your mind, memory, you bring that to mind, and then you're particularly focusing on the hardness of bones, that characteristic. Sometimes people visualize bones, focus the mind, and the mind becomes very absorbed into the image of the bone, and then they turn to contemplate afterwards. So contemplation is developing insight into the three characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. So how do the bones reflect that? Well, the bones are obviously impermanent, aren't they? When just first of all, you might just think it through as just a thinking meditation, just to prepare your mind, get the information right, get the understanding right. What happens when a human being dies or an animal dies? Well, if you weren't to bury them or cremate them, you could just leave them in the forest, like we do here sometimes. Not humans, but the bodies of deer and kangaroos, we sometimes leave them as for the monks to contemplate. What happens? Well, gradually the skin and the soft parts of the body disappear, the moisture, the air element disappears, the fire element's gone, it cools down, and all that's left are bones. And then the bones start to change, they change colour and they start to break apart. Sometimes they crack, sometimes animals scatter them. So gradually that human form has changed, or animal form in the case of a body in the forest, has changed from its, the usual perception of that form, the recognizable form of a deer, a kangaroo, or if it was a person, that's changed, and all you got left are bones, and then the bones scatter and the bones change color and the bones start to break down, and as they break down, little bits become powdery, chip off. Eventually, you've just got bones mixing with earth, and little by little the earth element becomes apparent. So as a contemplation, in the beginning it's just thinking about it, reasoning, using manasikara, reasoned reflection about what happens to a human body and the bones turning into earth, going back to the earth as it were, the hardness of that element, the characteristics of the element. But over time, if one-pointedness arises, samadhi arises, it may be just focusing on one characteristic of the earth element as it manifests. It could be the hair, the bones, any other part of the body. And little by little your mind is separating from the object. It takes an image of the object, say, as a nimitta, and the mind is just knowing that object, and we say seeing the body in the body, or knowing the body in the body. So the sense of self, the sense of attachment, grasping is fading, and it's just knowing and seeing as it is. This body is made up of elements, it's not a self. So you may take an external image first and then you bring it in and you're contemplating your own body. So if samadhi arises, there may be a combination of wisdom and samadhi at the same time, what we call vipassana, where mindfulness is strong, clear, and we're just seeing the body with this sense of detached awareness. So there's a body there, it's not that there's nothing there, but there's no self in it. The mind has withdrawn and is now looking on as if this body is without an owner. So for example, a lady once was here in a meditation retreat, and she had very profound insight where she was contemplating the body as not self, from different perspectives, and it wasn't yet fully clear to the mind. She realized it was at the moment just a perception, just an idea she's bringing up. But over the course of a retreat, her mind became more calm, mindfulness came up, she wasn't very distracted, and she was just focusing on her body over and over again. And perhaps because she was so into her meditation, she wasn't so aware of her handbag. And at one point in the retreat, she picked up someone else's handbag by mistake. This is, walking in and out of the hall, say. So for a moment she'd picked up someone else's bag and was walking out, and then she looked at her hand, she realized I picked up the wrong handbag. So she walked back, put it down next to the owner and picked her own bag up. But at that moment her mind was very calm in samadhi, and she had been contemplating not self, letting go of self with this detached awareness. And she said it just struck her at that moment that just as soon as you realize this handbag is not yours, you're quite happy to let it go and you have no further interest in it because you know it's not yours. You give it back to the owner. She then brought that same reflection up to her own body, and it happened quite naturally. You might call this insight, wisdom arising. And she realized her body is exactly the same. These parts of the body that are made up of the four elements are not owned by anyone. They don't have any inherent self or ownership. They're there, they exist, they're elements, but there's no owner. And just in the same way as if you pick up someone else's bag and then you realize that, so you give it away without any further attachment because you know it's not yours, her mind could see at that moment that her body was not belonging to anyone, so there was a sense of really letting go of the body. And she said, of course, it was such a profound insight, it was very shocking at first, but then a profound peace afterwards and a sense of relief because the mind was seeing, maybe for the first time clearly, that this body can be let go of. And seeing is just a collection of elements. And she had been focusing on, particularly on the bones, so just seeing, oh, these bones don't really belong to anyone. Everyone has bones, they're nothing special, everyone has a skeleton, but when we die, that skeleton goes back to dust, earth, it gets buried, it gets cremated. So you have the overview like that, and then it's about focusing in on that regularly, developing samadhi, developing insight. And of course that's quite a profound insight, so it's not something you might have casually or easily, but when people do have such insights, often they have this sort of a clear awareness that this body is made up of bones or the earth element or any of the other elements, depending which element you're focusing on. And you may have nimittas and realizations that reflect that. So for one insight that a number of monks I know have had is seeing their own body or the body of another person just melt down into a pile of earth. You know, it sounds very obvious, very easy to say, but this is something that's just emerging out of the peaceful mind, and it's not something they're kind of creating so that they can have an insight that they can tell their friends about or something. It's just a quite natural realization that this body is earth, and then a visual experience that's reflecting that. So contemplation of the elements is a very beneficial practice. I would recommend everyone to do it at least some of the time. But it can become one's main meditation object and one's main vehicle for developing vipassana insight into the impermanent, selfless nature of the body. As we just chanted with Satipatthana, knowing the body as just a body, merely a body, not me, mine, myself, not belonging to a person, not mine, not yours. So cutting through the conventional reality of the view of being a person, a self, with a self-identity and a personality, all that disappears and your mind is seeing that the body is just elements, it's not a self. Even harder is to see the mind as an element, but that's another story. We didn't get that in this question, so I'll leave that there. Another question. Please explain the behaviors of having a high sense of self-importance or excessive needs for admiration or a strong sense of entitlement, jealousy, or somebody who develops relationships with other people only for self-benefit. Is there any way to help a person with these qualities recognize that they are unhealthy, immature? Thank you. Well, of course, living in the world will meet many people displaying many different kinds of behavior. The coverall, as we've just been describing from the last question, is that it's all not self. The body of that person, whether they're very humble or very puffed up, arrogant, conceited, whether they're a nobody or they're a somebody, whether their view is that they're very entitled, a VIP, or they're not, they're hopeless and unworthless, whether they're somebody with jealousy or somebody who is very altruistic and has a lot of joy for others. In the end, the body of that person is the same, 4 elements. The mind is the quality that just knows. So any meditation technique that's helping to boost and develop strong mindfulness and from that states of calm will help you to have insight into the impermanent, selfless nature of these kind of behaviors or mental states. The thing is, what we tend to do is see them in other people all the time. We go to work, go out, or we open up social media, whatever, and we're seeing this kind of behavior around us, and maybe we aspire to practice Buddhism, to develop virtue, to develop kindness, compassion, mindfulness, insight. So when we see these behaviors in other people, that we tend to react with disapproval, or we shrink away, we don't like it. Because these kind of behaviors, when you're in a peaceful state, they do appear a little bit ugly, and we recognize that they're actually leading to suffering for those individuals. Maybe they don't realize. But the important thing is maybe to spend a little bit less time looking at these behaviors in others, because you'll always find them in the world. Sometimes it's right in our face, in our daily life. Sometimes it's just in books or movies or on social media. But that's other people, and we can't do a lot about them. They've got to practice. What the Buddha encouraged us to do is turn our attention back on ourselves. Do I have this kind of behavior? Do I go around acting as though I'm a somebody because I don't want to be a nobody? Do I expect everybody to treat me like a VIP and have this kind of privileged expectation, and then get upset when I don't get it from other people, but I don't get the attention I want, or people don't give me the credibility, the face that I want? Do I have this kind of behavior? Do I suffer in this way? That's how we have to understand these things. Turn around and see, are these qualities within me? So coming on a retreat in a monastery is a great place to let go of all your sense of privilege, entitlement. Becoming a Buddhist monk, even better. You just sit your place in the line, there's no way around it. If you ordained after someone, you always sit after them, receive the food after them. If you ordain before someone, you might sit ahead of them, but that may also bring responsibility with it as well. There's an order in the monastery which is all geared to helping strip away this conceit, sense of self, pride, arrogance, and so on. The monastic training really helps with that, and developing mindfulness so you can see these states. And then the practice of the monastic discipline helps you. You just have one bowl for your meal. You don't have a VIP bowl. Although you probably could work on that if you were a bit devious and try and get a bigger bowl than the next guy. Or a fancier, jewel-encrusted bowl perhaps. But you don't. You just get a bowl, and you use your bowl, and everyone has the same bowl, and you have the same robes. If you look at the life of the Buddha, he could have been very proud, conceited, arrogant, VIP mind state, couldn't he? Because he was the leader, the first teacher, and he had a whole sangha of disciples, so he could have misused that position. But he didn't. The Buddha still kept the attitude of being a very humble practitioner, a monk. People would come to the monastery sometimes and not know which one is the Buddha, because he didn't put on airs and graces and try and get everyone to sort of praise him and make a fuss over him. He was very ordinary. So people could see the monks sitting, they're not sure yet which one's the Buddha. Or the robes of the Buddha sometimes were mistaken. Somebody else picked up the robe of the Buddha because the Buddha's robes were made from pangsakula cloth, cast off cloth, not very good quality cloth, and probably didn't look the best. Maybe had patches and color discoloration. So sometimes another monk picked up the Buddha's robes by mistake. That's how humble the Buddha was, because he had no more attachment to self. That's how we practice in the monastery. You're not practicing for worldly gain, fame, fortune, reputation, all of that. You're practicing for Nibbana, not self, the insight into not self, into the unconditioned. So of course out in the world people aren't doing that, but you can still take the wisdom of the Buddha and use it. And rather than getting caught up in other people's behavior, that's something you just know, you witness, but you can't change. But you have to come back and look at yourself. Do I have that kind of behavior? And as long as we have attachment to this body and the sense of self, the way we feel, the way we think, our emotions, our knowledge, everything, as long as there's attachment, well, some of this behavior will happen, won't it? Sometimes you'll notice yourself getting jealous of another person who seems to get on better than you or have more than you, look better, have more things, more friends, more this, more that. That will come up sometimes. So see through it, through investigating it. Bring up the mindfulness and contemplate. It's not self, it's not permanent, it's not self, it's not sure. That was Ajahn Chah's one. Very simple antidote to a strong sense of entitlement, excessive needs for admiration. It's not sure. One day they praise you, the next day they blame you. It comes as a pair. It comes as a package. The package of human existence is that you won't get praised and admired all the time. It's nice when it comes maybe, but don't attach to it because it's not sure. You just look at the world around you as you have been doing. You notice in how up and down these superficial kinds of happiness are, and reflect back on yourself. You can't expect everybody to praise you every day. It won't happen. Sometimes they praise you. Sometimes they praise you when it's not even deserved. People can do that. And if you're not careful, you might attach to that. Some kind of false image you put out there that you're better than you are, you've done more than you have. Some people are like that, but it's a trap, isn't it? It's a trap that leads to suffering. Always chasing praise, admiration, and then when you don't get it, you get upset, get annoyed. If people ignore you, you feel unhappy. Once you're practicing the path, it doesn't matter whether they praise you or blame you. Of course, they may be useful to you. If someone criticizes you, maybe that's quite useful because they're pointing out a fault you haven't seen. Sometimes it's true what they say. Not always, but sometimes it is. So Ajahn Chah used to say, establish mindfulness and reflect. What are they saying? Is it true? Is it useful for you? Is it useful feedback? Are they pointing out something you've done wrong, a fault, a weakness? If it's true, there's no need to get angry or upset. Just reflect. Oh, it's true. They're helping me see something I didn't see before. If it's not true, it's undeserved, well, there's no need to get angry because it's not true, and you just know that, and you can say that to them if needs be. It's not true. But there's no need to get angry or upset. You're just considering with mindfulness, is it true, is it not, and then responding appropriately. That's what we're aiming for, to respond to the world with mindfulness and wisdom, as opposed to just raw emotion. I like it, I want it. I don't like it, I hate it, I don't want it. When we're not mindful, we tend to be more like that, don't we? And so we do suffer with the words of other people, the opinions of other people, how things go. It's not sure. As a monk, you get this quite often because as a monk, you get respect from Buddhists generally. They praise you, and you know, well, I'm not that good a monk. I haven't developed my path of practice very well yet, so you don't take that praise too seriously because maybe you realize it's not deserved yet. But then when you meet non-Buddhists, maybe they're actually quite critical of you. Like the very first time I went Bindabat into Warburton 20 years ago, the first person saw me on the street, they say, "Oh, who are you? Get a life." So, oh, okay, praise and blame, not sure. And then, later on in the same arms round, you meet someone who's very respectful. "Oh, I'm so happy to see monks, I'm so happy you're here." It's not sure, life is like that. As a monk, you see the extremes quite often. Some people, shout abuse at you occasionally, not very often. Other people bow down to you and praise you. Up and down it goes. Especially in a non-Buddhist country, you see those extremes all the time. So you need to keep a sense of humor and lighten up a bit, don't take it too seriously. But this is how we practice with these kind of attachments, and you can only help other people so much. So maybe the best way to help others is do your own practice, and maybe they'll benefit when they see you practicing, shedding things, shedding your attachment to your conceit, your pride. Because it's inspiring, isn't it? If you meet someone who's humble, they've let go of their pride, they have more mindfulness, more compassion, say. It's inspiring to meet people like that, especially people who are in situations where you would normally think they might be attached to their power, their authority, their fame, their reputation. When they show humility, it's always pleasant, isn't it? It's a pleasant surprise and reassuring. So whether it's monks or just anyone in any walk of life, when people show humility, they know how to set aside their conceit. It's inspiring, it's good. So keep working on yourself, and that may give you insight how to deal with people around you who display these characteristics. Another question. The monk's lifestyle and rules of discipline seem quite extreme in the modern world. Is it necessary to become a monk or a nun to realize Nibbana? Well, the simple answer is no, it's not necessary, but it helps. One thing I've learned over the years is that lay people who have advanced in their practice, lay men, lay women, they tend to stay close to Sangha, respect Sangha, take on a lot of the practices of Sangha even though they're living in lay life. So even if they're not living in a monastery, they often live in a monastic way. So the one quite common scenario is for a man or woman who's reached the point where they really want to commit more to the path of practice of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. They see the limitations and drawbacks of lay life, but maybe for one reason or another they're not ready to ordain as a monk or a nun. But they do change their lifestyle. So maybe they live at home and they develop their home like a little hermitage, and they reduce their social engagements. Maybe they've got enough material wealth, they don't have to work anymore, they can stay at home and they live very simply. Maybe they keep the 8 precepts. They might not shave their head, but they're keeping the 8 precepts. They're developing a regular meditation practice, listen to Dhamma, they may have a teacher they refer to and visit. So their home becomes more like a little monastery, as it were. They may still have family ties and things, but they incorporate that into their practice. And sometimes those lay people are very inspiring. Ajahn Chah used to have a lot of lay people who didn't become monks or nuns, but they were very close. They came to the monastery regularly, meditated, practiced in the monastery, listened to the Dhamma to the point they could teach Dhamma if they were called upon, and they might teach their relatives, their children, nephews, nieces, and so on. Or Ajahn Chah occasionally would get them to give a Dhamma talk to the other monks, or to the monks and lay people, or to the nuns. Those lay people, they clearly had insight into the Dhamma. There was one layman Anagarika stayed with the Luang Por Chah for many years, and Ajahn Chah praised him that he could meditate just like the monks, he could live like a monk, but he was a white-robed layman. He never requested ordination, so Ajahn Chah said, well, he never requested ordination, so we don't need to ordain him because his mind is already like a monk, even though he's on the outside, he's still living as a layperson. And he was very peaceful. Ajahn Chah said, you don't need to ask anything of him, he'll always do the right thing without a word being said. He'll meditate, he'll help out with the monastery work, he'll serve the Sangha, a model layman. Luang Por Chah praised him. And there's lay women in the same way. They don't ask anything in return. They're just doing their practice as a layperson. They keep the 5 precepts well, maybe even 8 precepts. If they live at home, they have their own room or even their own granny flat or something like that. And I knew one lady who became a nun later in life when her children and family had all grown up. She didn't have to look after them anymore, so she became a nun, but she lived at home in a granny flat. And the kids and grandkids would come and see her, and she'd just teach them meditation. And she wouldn't want anything from them. She didn't want to bother them for any material things. She'd just give them a lot of metta, love, and teach them to practice mindfulness every day. That's a real blessing, isn't it? As a layperson, giving that kind of blessing back to your family. It's rare in the world, but it's what we need more of, isn't it? And people like that always have the chance to progress and develop insight into Magga, Phala, Nibbana, the path, fruit, and Nibbana. Last question. Isn't teaching people to recollect their good actions as a preparation for the end of their life encouraging them to attach to a sense of self? Well, yes, you can say that. Buddhism is always working on these 2 levels, the Buddha's own teachings and the way we talk about Dhamma practice. Much of the time we are using the convention of a self, a person who practices Dhamma, has faith in Buddha, has a body, has a mind, meditates, does dana, keeps precepts. It's useful to talk of a self, just for communication. But on the other hand, particularly in our meditation and our reflection, we're also seeing through to non-self. Especially when mindfulness is clear, insight is clear, we're seeing that this idea of a self is an illusion. The body is impermanent. Thoughts and feelings, memories are impermanent. So where's the self in all of that? That's the kind of insight that's coming out of your practice. But when we talk, we're still talking about a self. And particularly for people who haven't done much meditation or listened to a lot of Dhamma yet, maybe, better to talk about a self. It's what they'll understand. And so you're developing the good self first. Before you can let go of the whole idea of self, you have to develop the good self, meaning give up evil, cultivate good, in order for your mind to be ready and ripe and mature to develop insight into non-self. And so the Buddha would teach in a gradual way. He'd teach about the benefits of dana, sila, meditation, renunciation, meditation, insight, wisdom. And for most people, this is a gradual practice, a gradual awakening to the truth and understanding of the truth, and a gradual training of oneself. So some people, they come into the end of their life and you want them to be in a good, wholesome state to face that challenge. So it's a very quick and direct way to get wholesome states to arise, is to help them to remember or recollect the good they've done in their life. And we've all done some good. So it's there, but sometimes it's helpful to stimulate it, talk to them, get them to recollect it as a practice. You could even say it's a kind of meditation. If you want a technical term, they call it Cakanusati, remembering the generosity we've practiced, the sacrifices we've made for others, the things we've done for others, for the good in the world. Everyone has got something. Jakanusati is a meditation recollecting that, the good that we've done, and it brings joy. Recollecting how we've lived. Most people in this world die. They've never killed anyone. They never even have killed an animal. Maybe they've never stolen. They've never committed acts of sexual misconduct and harmed anyone. Maybe they've never told lies or abused other people. Maybe they never got drunk, intoxicated. Quite often people have a lot of sila in them that they don't recognize. Many people have lived quite virtuous lives, but they forget that. And maybe they focus on a few of their faults or a few of their problems in their life, and that takes over the mind when all the good stuff is being ignored. So one way we practice, not just on our deathbed, but through our life, is to recollect the good behavior we have done, the generosity and charity we've practiced, the virtuous conduct, helping others, acts of compassion, kindness, and of course the meditation we've done. And if, best of all, is if you're facing death, well, enter your meditation object, bring it out, enter samadhi, let go of everything. And Ajahn Kalyano often says, maybe you'll get enlightened on your deathbed as you let go of everything. That's a good ideal, but step by step realization of that. So begin with just recollecting the good that you've done. Put the mind in a nice space. And it's not to deny that we've made mistakes and done foolish things in our life, but you don't need to dwell on that. You recognize that and let it go, and then focus on the good. And this is training the mind, brings up joy, happiness. If you die with a happy mind, what more can you ask? If you're not yet ready for Nibbana, at least die with a happy mind, wholesome mind state, and you may get a heavenly rebirth. And the Buddha accepted that. Some people are not yet ready for Nibbana. Well, at least they might get a wholesome rebirth. Or recollecting the precepts, they come back as a human being. 5 precepts. If you die with the opposite in your mind, anger, grudges, revenge seeking, greed for all the things you've amassed, all your wealth, or confusion that you've built up in your mind, fears, worries, confusion. If you die with that, then it's not so good, is it? So of course, practice before you die, but if someone's on their deathbed, try to help stimulate the arising of wholesome dhammas and the abandoning of unwholesome dhammas, and then you're really helping them. So, those were a few questions tonight. We'll leave you with those answers to think about.
And